Hello, viewers. My guest today is Laura Gassner Otting. Laura is a professional speaker and author, and she is also the founder of Limitless Possibility, a consulting firm working with thought leaders to get them unstuck and achieve extraordinary results. Today, Laura and I are going to be talking about one of my favorite books, her book, Limitless: How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. Welcome, Laura. So, Laura, what I'm curious about is, what does it mean to be limitless?
Oh, Susan, we all know what it feels like to be limited by everyone else's ideas of what we can do and what we should do and what we have to do, and God forbid what we can't do. I mean, personally, I don't know about you, but I had a teacher who in fourth grade who told me that I was a really argumentative young woman and that I should become a lawyer. So of course I told her she was wrong because, I'm argumentative. But then I still proceeded to create a career path that got me to law school, where on the very first day I was like, I don't belong here. I've made a huge mistake. So I dropped out, right? And then when I dropped out, I joined a presidential campaign. And on that presidential campaign, I met the man of my mother's dreams. And the problem with him is that every time I kissed him, all I could think of was like milk, butter, eggs, cheese. I should pick up the groceries. I should start on that report. I didn't have any spark with him. So I didn't fit her definition of success either, right? I upset my fourth grade teacher. I upset my parents. And then I got to my first job where I was progressing and I was proceeding, and I found myself the youngest vice president at this really phenomenal search firm. And I was in a meeting. I remember this day as clear it was yesterday, where I was looking at my client across the table from me, and beyond them was the beautiful Boston Commons. And I was looking at the park, and I was thinking in my head, I was doing the math about making my numbers for that quarter. And my clients noticed it, and they noticed that I wasn't really paying attention to them and their problem, but me and my problem, which is that I needed to make my numbers. And here's the kicker: I didn't make my numbers because they could tell I wasn't paying attention, because I was limited by my boss's definition of success also. And I think each of us, whether it's in school or at home or at work, have somebody who says, stamp, here is the definition of success. This is what success looks like. And the problem is that we then spend our lives pursuing this definition, only to realize that we're limited by everyone else's idea of what success should be, because we haven't figured out what success means to us.
So, what prompted you to write Limitless?
So I spent 20 years working in executive search, where my job was to call the most successful people in the world, right? Bold-faced names, the people that you've heard of, and convince them to leave a job where they're pretty happily ensconced because they're doing good work there, and convince them to go work for my clients. And that would sound like a really hard job, except here's the thing: despite all that success, they weren't really all that happy. So I was calling them because they were successful, but they were taking my calls because they weren't happy. And I was fascinated by this question of, what if success doesn't equal happiness? And as I continued to go through this career, I realized that there were only a handful of people that I couldn't recruit away. And I started to think about my own career and changes that I made along the way, when I left things, when I started things, when I grew, when I shrank. And I realized that it was always in those moments where I changed what I was doing because it wasn't working for me personally. I felt this disconnect, this like organ rejection, organ failure rejection, where it just wasn't working. What I realized was the answer to what makes us happy in our lives isn't quote unquote success, but it's this idea of consonance, alignment, flow, and what we do matches who we are. And what I realized was that the handful of people who I couldn't recruit over 20 years of interviewing thousands of people were the ones who had this alignment and flow. And the times when I made massive decisions in my life was because I didn't have it then. And so I wrote a book to really answer this question of, what if success doesn't equal happiness, and what actually does.
Interesting. I have to let my dog back in. All right, come in and be quiet.
This sounds interesting. I want to hear more.
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the things you talk about in your book, Laura, is that alignment of passion and interests and how to find it. How do you do that? How do you come up with consonants? I know you have a 4-step process for that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do. But I want to first, if we can, talk about this word passion, because,
Okay, please.
how many times have you been heard by some, or how many times have you heard from some like thought leader, guru type to follow your passion? Right? Like as if that's the answer. And we've
Yeah.
all seen it. We've either seen it from like people like Tony Robbins getting on stage and screaming that out, or like some flaxen haired beauty sitting at Coachella with her like flowered crown and her beautiful, beach waved hair, like follow your passion.
Yeah.
As if the moment you find your passion, all you need to do is simply follow it. Huzzah! Life
Right.
will be great. And that's not how it works,
Right.
right? Like, in order to find your passion, you've got to mess up. You got to screw up. You have to fail. It's going to knock you down. You're going to have to pick yourself back up. It's going to gut you. It might gut your bank account in the process, but it's the thing that you want to figure out, right? Like everybody says, tell me what you would do if you knew you couldn't fail. That's your passion. And I say, no, tell me what you knew you would do if you knew for sure you would fail. And yet you would do it over and over and over and over until you got it right. That's your passion. So rather than following your passion, I tell people they should invest in their passion. And that means you got to like watch great LinkedIn's like this, have conversations with people like Susan who are amazing, read great books, like listen to the TED Talks, talk to career counselors. Like you got to invest in your passion to get there the right way. And so, my frustration with all of this, I don't know, like instafluence or nonsense that we see about like what's going to make you happy in your life is that it doesn't actually stop and say the definition that's right for everyone else is not going to be the definition that's right for you. And so in my book, I talk about this idea of consonance as being made up of four things: calling, connection, contribution, and control. So very quickly, and we can talk about them individually, but calling it's that gravitational force, the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's the business you want to build, the bottom line you want to grow, the cause that you want to help, the leader who you want to serve, the family you want to nurture. It is the thing that matters most to you. Connection. Does your work actually matter? If you called in sick tomorrow, if you didn't show up in the Zoom meeting, would anybody notice? Would anybody care? Can you draw a direct line from the work you're doing every single day to that calling that you want to serve? Third, contribution. If connection's all about the work, contribution's really all about you. So how does this brand, this paycheck, this job, this work that you're doing, this career, how does it allow you to live the life you want, to give the lifestyle you're looking for, to give you the career trajectory you desire, or maybe allow you to manifest your values on a daily basis? And then lastly is control. And control really answers the question, how much agency do you have over what teams you're assigned to, what projects you're tasked to, what metrics you're judged by? Do you have any control over how much your work connects to your calling and how much it contributes to your life? And each of us at every age and at every life stage will want and need different amounts of it. So, when I was 21 years old, dropping out of law school to join that presidential campaign, I was so happy to be paid in all the idealism I could eat. But now, as I just turned 51 a couple days ago, it turns out I've grown into a little bit of a princess. And I've learned that idealism can buy a lot of really good feelings, but it doesn't buy fancy sheets and nice vacations. And I kind of want those things now. So, at every age and stage, we want different things. So your definition is going to be different than my definition, but your definition is also going to be different than your definition of probably about every 7 to 10 years. And we have to stop and check in on ourselves and redefine for ourselves what that success means.
Yeah.
And that means that guidance counselor you talked to before you had a frontal lobe, the one you talked to in high school or college, the one that said, pick a job, pick a major, pick a trade, pick a career. And you went, okay, you're not the same person as you were then. And what mattered to you then isn't what matters to you now. So we have to keep continuing to recheck in on ourselves about what really defines success now, especially after the pandemic, when so many of us are asking this question of, when life goes back to normal, is the normal I'm going back to really the life I want?
Right.
And for a lot of us, that answer is nope.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go back to something you said, but I also want to talk to you about the pandemic, and it's the whole thing that's happening with the Great Resignation.
Yes.
And how your concept of consonance relates to that. But I want to go back to your definition of passion for a moment, because I think you made such an important point. And that is, you have to have enough life experience to know what interests you.
Right.
And to try different things out. People come to me as a career strategist and a coach to say, what should I be doing? Well, I ask them to reflect on what they have done. And over that period of time, what has really lit them up? What are they proud of? To reflect on those experiences, because it's looking back on those things that helps them understand, what really makes them will want them to make them get out of bed in the morning. So,
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you say that because when I was a headhunter, I would ask people questions. I would ask them all sorts of biographical questions, like, talk to me about a parent, a teacher, a person of the cloth, a nurse, a coach, somebody who had an impression on you, somebody who, you looked up to, who you wanted to emulate. And I would ask them about what went right, what went wrong at all the different points in their career. And it's amazing because you can start seeing like a little breadcrumb of, oh,
uh-huh,
so the traits of, really, extreme ownership and showing up, which came from the coach who told you that you never let your team down. Then you start seeing that about like what happened when there was a crisis at work, or, something bad happened in the world, or you start seeing that. And it's really easy to draw that line backwards and make this very logical path. People ask me all the time, like, how did you become a speaker? How did you become an author? And wow, you've had so many great experiences. It's so terrific. And I'm like, well, yeah, it was completely accidental. So it's easy. I could tell the story two ways. I could tell the story and say it was all a plan, and let me tell you about my strategy from day one. Or I could tell the real story, which was that it was all complete luck and, a ton of hard work, but also a lot of luck, right? And I think a lot of times when we don't look back and think about what causes me joy, what brought out the very best in me, who
yes,
was I in these moments when I was at my fundamental best, and what
exactly.
was it about those moments? Like, was there an audience? Was it in private? Was it loud? Was it quiet? Was I helping somebody? Was I learning myself? Like, what are the things that we're doing? What's the energy and the words and the muscles that we're using? And then you start saying, are there patterns? Are there other places where I did that? And how can I recreate that into the career that I want right now? Right. And so I can look back and I can say, whatever, it was all completely accidental. Or I could look back and I can say, yeah, I was always most turned on when I was helping get the right people in the right places to
Mhm.
change the world, whether it was, in a
Interesting.
presidential campaign, whether it was as a headhunter, whether it was working as a coach, an executive coach now, whether it's getting on stages and helping people get unstuck. That is the theme that works its way
Yes.
through. But I never could have, like, if you would have asked me when I was 21 what
You
my
couldn't have
passion
done
was,
that.
I
No,
would never have
no,
said getting
of
people
course
unstuck. I thought I
not.
was the most stuck person in the world. Like, so I think I love this approach that you have of figuring out sort of where you were at your best and when you were happiest and what caused you the most joy and what really lit you up inside, because there are so many ways to recreate those moments intentionally.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, for sure. So, how does consonance relate to the Great Resignation, and how should people considering leaving their jobs think about those four aspects of consonance before they take that leap to leave their job?
Yeah, well, so it's funny that you asked me this question today because actually just spent the morning writing a new keynote, which is going to be called the Limitless Leader, which basically takes all these elements of consonance and helps leaders figure out how to have real conversations with their workers. Because look, we have heard lots of people talking about the Great Resignation, and a lot of people say it's just because you need to pay your people more. The government's paying people to stay home, and so you need to pay people more. Well, okay, if you're not paying a living wage, fix that. Okay.
Right.
Like, let's fix that right now. But for the most of employees who are paying a living wage, it's not about the money. It feels like the money is the like easy button, right? Like, let's smash the easy button. You pay your best worker shows up in your office and they're disgruntled and they're dissatisfied and they're waving a resignation letter. And so you give them more money. And what happens 3 months from now and 6 months from now and 9 months from now and 12 months from now? They're back again because it gives them a temporary lift, but that's not true satisfaction at work. What I have learned through actually 3 years of research and almost 6,000 responses of this very intense assessment that I've done, during, and now post, as we're trying to reconfigure our lives as we leave the pandemic behind, hopefully, is that it's fact money is not the thing that excites most workers. Only 1 in 3 workers say that money is the most important metric in terms of their job satisfaction, which means that 2/3 of your workforce are looking for something else. And what
Mhm.
they're looking for is consonance, right? They're looking for what matters to them. So I can tell you that millennials, they want to feel appreciated in their work. Gen Xers want to feel like they have some kind of control and some kind of flexibility because they're at a point in their lives where they're in the sandwich generation, aging parents, young children, et cetera. I can tell you that Boomers want to be, they want to feel relevant, right? They want to be still at the table. They don't want to be pushed out. And I can tell you that Gen Z, that's coming up behind everybody, is just excited to be inspired that like there's a bigger purpose and that we're thinking about these bigger problems. Each generation wants something different. Men and women want different things too. Women, as they are rising through the ranks, actually need more control because, of course, we take
Yes.
on the majority of the, childcare
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
housework.
Mhm.
But we actually stall out midway through our careers. That's a huge problem. So
Yeah.
what I would say, and I could go on and on about these statistics, but what I would say is that if you were thinking about changing jobs right now during the Great Resignation, I would stop and say, what is it that I'm actually looking for more of? Because some people may say, I want control. It feels like we have control when we quit our job. It's like a thing that we can do. But the truth is that in almost 6,000 responses, what I learned, the only metric of calling, connection, contribution, and control that went up was control. Control went up by 18% during the pandemic because when in March and April of 2020, when employers were just trying to survive, right, we were all just trying to figure out what to do and how to survive and how to stay afloat, all of the busy work and the unnecessary meetings and all the garbage disappeared. Suddenly
Mhm.
it was like mission critical and mission critical only. So workers who now feel like they only have to do work that matters and they're doing work that actually is moving the ball forward, they're feeling much more excited. And then you couple that with them being able to do work when and how they want to,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
actually feel like they have more control. So this, there is this idea that, oh, it's a pandemic, I have no control, I want to do something. Boom, just like money is an easy button for employers, quitting a job is an easy button
Right.
for workers.
But it's only temporary.
It's only temporary, and you don't want to then just recreate what you had, right? You don't want to replicate what you had
Exactly.
somewhere else where,
Exactly.
you got to learn and
Right.
you've got no reputation to rest on. So really thinking about what causes you joy, what do you want to do? How much do you need calling to be a part of your work? How much does the daily work have to connect to what matters? Maybe you're just in it for the money. No judgment. That's cool. If that's what you're
Mhm.
looking for,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
fine too. But it's really understanding why you do the work you do and the role that it plays in your life and your family and your community, largely in a bigger picture that really makes the difference in whether or not that next job is going to be the solution or whether it's just a panacea.
So, Laura, what should managers take away from this and from this research that you've done?
So the most important thing that I have found is this: we know. Well, there's a lot of things they can do, but the one that I think sort of turned my head the most is that it's obvious. We know bad leaders bleed out workers, right? We
Mhm.
know that they burn them out, they bleed them out, they lose them, and we know that good leaders are awesome, right? That makes sense. But it turns out that if you're a good leader, but you don't have a good relationship with your employees, you are just as at risk as a bad leader. So, from my research, workers report that if they don't have a strong relationship with their boss or just a neutral relationship with their boss, they don't feel empowered. They don't feel like they have any agency to make any change. They don't feel like they can bring their best selves to work. They don't feel like their work actually matters or that they understand how their work and the quality of the work actually affects the bigger picture. So, even if you're a good manager, even if you've gone to school, you've got all the certificates, you've done, you've been told by your bosses you're a great leader. If you don't have good relationships with your people, you're going to lose your people. And you are especially going to lose your middle managers that are 30 to 45 years old and the 25 to 30-year-olds that you're training to become middle managers. Those are the ones that are most at risk right now. So what do? You double down on relationships. You make sure people feel like their opinion matters to you. You bring them to the table, even if they're just listening. You show them the bigger picture. You give them sightlines into the strategic ideas that are behind the decisions that you're making. And you allow them to feel like they actually matter, like who they are, you believe in them, you understand what they're doing. So even if they're not doing the best work, but you're investing in them, you're having conversations with them, they're going to feel like they've got a great relationship with you. And when workers feel like they can bring their best selves to work, they actually grow the community and everybody around them to be even better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just published an article in Harvard Business Review on 5 questions every manager should ask their employee. And it got such tremendous response because they're really in some ways very obvious, but they're questions that most people are not asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share them? I want
Yeah, no, I'll send them to you, but it's really the things that you're talking about. It's like, do you feel like you have the opportunity to do your best every day? Do you feel you're connected to the mission of the organization? Do you feel that the organization has a mission? Um, what am I missing as a manager that I should know about?
Mhm.
So those are three, off the top of my head. Oh, are you getting the recognition you feel you deserve?
Oh, yes. Yes. And, it's so interesting because, when some of my executive coaching clients will come to me and they're like, I don't know. I mean, I just keep giving them raises and they're still unhappy. And I'm like, well, do you know what matters to them? Like, maybe what matters most to them is manifesting their values through their work. We're at work the majority of our waking hours. Maybe they want to be able to, manifest their values. They want to be able to live who they are outside of work, inside of work. Do you have a philanthropy committee at your work? Well, no, we don't have one, but I mean, we give away some money every year. And I'm like, well, what if you just formed a committee and you said, we want to give away, X percentage of our profits every year or X dollars, it's just a straight number. And you said, and you can say, we don't want to do political. We don't want to do like, you can put some barriers around it, but then put that person in charge of running the process. They will get to feel like they're getting to manifest their values and they can feel like they're the
Absolutely.
same person. And by the way, it's free.
Yeah.
Most of the solutions, the questions that you're talking about, these are free,
Right.
right? I mean, the
Right.
recognition
Right.
that people want, like sometimes it's money, but very often it's more control, it's more
Yes.
autonomy. I mean, people say that they will take jobs that give them more autonomy, more control over jobs that give them more power, right?
Right.
People feel like they want to have control. Like people want to be grown-ups.
And they
So,
want to have a voice.
and
They
they
want
want
to
to
have a
have a
voice
voice.
in the institution.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Laura, I know that you have an assessment that people can take, a limitless assessment. Can you talk about how people can how viewers can get access to that, and
Yeah.
also some of your other resources?
Yeah, so it's a free assessment. It's very easy at limitlessassessment.com. Now, I warn you, it's 67 questions long. So it is fairly intense. There's about 54 questions that are straight up about calling, connection, contribution, and control. Half of those questions will ask how much of it you have in your life right now, and the other half will ask how much of it you want to have in your life. Because here's the thing, if you don't want any calling in your life and you don't have any calling in your life, awesome, you're in consonance. If you want a ton of calling, but you don't have any calling, well, then you're not. So, depending on where you fall in each of the four areas, it will then spit out very specific recommendations for you to do right now, today, to get more of each of the four C's of calling, connection, contribution, and control that you want. And then there's some demographic questions at the end of it because that's how we come up with the research that we're producing. So that's at limitlessassessment.com. You can take it, you can have your team take it, you can have it'll spur great conversations about what actually really matters. If you're just taking it for you and you're like, Laura, I can't take 67 questions, I don't have 20 minutes, I don't care that much about my life, and you just want to take 4 questions, there is a 4 question quiz at my4questions.com. So there is 1 question each on calling, connection, contribution, and control, and it'll still give you pretty good answers, but my guess is it'll probably inspire you to take the longer quiz. And then if you're interested in figuring out more ways to find each of these things, calling, connection, contribution, and control, all of those are available on my website. There's a free resources guide that has everything you'd want to find.
Wonderful. Anything else? Courses? Anything else you want
I do
viewers
have a
to know about?
course. Yes,
Okay.
I have a course called the Limitless Course. So if you were thinking about making a career change and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, it's a course. It's about 5 hours in length, and it comes with a 70-page workbook and all sorts of worksheets that you can use to figure out who you are, where you are, who you are today. I don't know about you, Susan, but I feel like I'm a little bit of a different person today than I was in the beginning of 2020. And I think just having that moment to stop and assess and figure out what actually matters to me now, I think that's a gift we can all give ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Laura, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Susan. It's always great to talk to you.
Absolutely.